in light of this attack, there's a lot of very important points that, that are to be made. I think that understanding the NRA and the domestic arms market as a business interest that has financial capture over the Republican Party is even, I think, is actually more profitable kind of political economy understanding than even the sort of cultural politics of guns, in my view. So I think it's important to look at it that way. I think it's obviously quite notable and important and clear that in the race politics and race history of America, that obviously when white people commit acts of mass atrocity and violence, it is categorized as a one-off or in context. It's never, it's never white on white crime or, something like that. And I think that, if you can imagine if a black man was at the top of a luxury hotel and opened up fire at the end of, a festival featuring Kendrick Lamar and Travis Scott and Jay-Z, think about how that coverage would sound, okay? So the race thing here is quite obvious. In this clip of Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow, there's another angle to take with this, which I actually, in fact, have a real problem with. I totally understand the sentiment, but I have a problem. Let's take a look.
Conversation about that in any way that follows the rational rules of argument.
And there is also this sense, we're standing here, and I have to say, for people watching at home, the sheer magnitude of this and the horror of how far away he was from what he was shooting at, which doesn't strike you until you're up against the scale of it. There's this question about whether it's terrorism, and it just almost feels like that word has just been exploded of meaning. Because if this isn't terrorism, then what the hell is terrorism? The sheer fear, terror, and panic that was imposed on the 22,000 people that were there, if that doesn't meet the definition, then what the hell do we mean by the definition?
Well, the point of terrorism is to achieve a political, ideological aim separate and apart from the carnage that you've caused. Whether it's by infuriating the people who see themselves as compatriots with your targets that they lash out in a way that creates a convenient battle, or whether it's some other thing that derives from the crime itself. Right? There's some tertiary goal.
Okay, so I actually am more inclined to agree with Rachel Maddow on that, and I think it's very important. There's one line that says, look, there is no doubt in some media coverage that terrorism that has been perpetuated by white nationalists, as an example, does not get written up the same way and certainly is not greeted with the same breathless hysteria as terrorism that emanates from a group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, right? So it is very important that if we're talking about specific, as Rachel is saying there's some type of ideological origin there, whether it be religious or political in a certain fashion, that terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan, of white nationalists, of the alt-right, whatever, that be categorized as such. That category be clear, and it does not just apply to people acting in the name of Islamic, particularly it's a brand of Islamic ideology. That's crucial. But this broader statement that we want to just start throwing this word terrorism around to cover everything, or that the answer to policies that are racist, that are built on profiling communities of color, that are built on building categories of oppression, distinction, state monitoring and surveillance, death and abuse, that we want to somehow add to that versus subtract to that, I have a fundamental problem with. So if we start saying look, I understand the sentiment and the race politics of this is obvious in terms of how it's covered, but the answer is not, this is terrorism, profile this white guy. The answer is profile no one, solve actual crimes, and deal with policy that could prevent it. In this case, obviously, having to do with what types of guns are available and how they're regulated. But I think that discourse to go to things are awful, let's focus on distributing the awfulness more fairly versus subtracting from it and moving away from it is just important rhetorically. And I want to keep terrorism in a very clearly defined package and have it be, of course, applied to all manners of terrorism. That's fundamental. This is an act of mass murder. It's an act of cruelty. It's an act of insanity. It's in some ways, in fact, from my understanding of when I've read, and I have a bit, not much, but some, whenever I've read or listened to people who are involved in forensic psychology or who comment on this, they do say, in fact, it is better to not obsess over the people who perpetuate these crimes. It's better to not make them household names. It has a discouraging effect to some extent on people that might actually do something like this. And obviously, I mean, this is just, in a certain sense, I mean, even the, most obscene, grotesque actions that are motivated by an ideology, we can say, well, it's, reflects this disgusting ideology, whatever it is. This is, who could possibly understand why somebody would do something this grotesque? And I have no real interest in, there are people who do this professionally who need to figure out this personality profile, how to prevent this from happening. I don't have any interest in it. I don't think the guy's interesting.
Well, I mean, he's only interested in the fact that he's like a rich real estate guy.
Right.
Like, that's the interesting element of it. Who has the luxury to buy, like, dozens of high-powered, I assume very expensive rifles.
Right. No, he's right. He's rich. He's privileged. He is, in contradiction to all of our sort of stereotypes of, this is a good person. This and the last note. I mean, look at how when Trump talks about this, yes, it's a tragedy. Yes, it's horrific. It's also, again, I don't want to get into that act of terrorism verbiage, but Donald Trump has expressed more anger at football players trying to participate in American civic life than this fucking grotesque mass murderer. So take that what you will.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos